Here we are on a Monday, and it's a big one. Doesn't seem like a big one because, obviously when you get into the summer, you get that odd period where you are off of the NBA, you are awaiting training camp for the NFL, you have Major League Baseball, you're awaiting the All-Star game. But it's interesting because here in Indianapolis, it's a little bit different. And easiest way to say why this week is of significance would be this. My wardrobe is essentially one of two things. It's either something I got from Roots Canada, or it's something I've gotten from, say, the shop or like the different T-shirt stores of stuff that is indigenous to or esoteric to Indianapolis. And much of that involves the Pacers, IU, the Colts, Butler, Purdue, whatever else. I've worn Pacers stuff around this country. I mean, not by like intention or design, but just I'm traveling for IndyCar and I happen to be wearing a Pacers t-shirt or a hat with the Pacers, whatever. And it's never really been a topic of conversation. But I just got back from a 4-day trip that was a little over 1,200 miles that went through 5 or 6 states. I went to 3 college campuses, 2 Hall of Fames, a Major League Baseball game, an NFL stadium, a college basketball arena, a college football stadium, I think 4 state capitals. And in one of those days, not even every day, in one of those days, this technically Saturday, so 2 days ago, I was wearing a Pacers shirt. And literally everywhere I went, someone made a comment about the Pacers. The gas station, lunch, getting a beer at the end of the night, back to the hotel. Anywhere I was, people said something about the Indiana Pacers. And it's been a long time since you, as a native of Indianapolis or a native of Indiana or a fan of the Indiana Pacers, could travel somewhere in the final week of June and have the Pacers topical or still fresh enough on one's mind that if they are from Rhode Island or Massachusetts or Pennsylvania, that they see Pacers and immediately have a comment about it. It's been a long time since the Pacers had and held that realm of relevance. But for their season to carry into mid-June to the point where then they go right up against the NBA draft, and the NBA draft seemingly hits you where you didn't even remember that the draft is this week. And I'm saying this retroactively like it was last week, because you were so focused on them playing games. And for us now in the final day of June to be here talking about the Indiana Pacers is amazing because, yes, we would always normally be talking about what they're going to do, like, say, through free agency. But coming off of what they just came off of and the recency with it, to know that it is still right there, and this is how fast that basketball schedule moves, to the point where you have now free agency right on the heels of the draft, and all of it coming right on the heels of a season. This is what it's felt like to be a Spurs fan or a Heat fan or a Lakers fan or a Celtics fan for the last 15 years, where you just go from last year to the hangover of it to rip off the calendar onto the next season and let's go. And tonight at 6 o'clock, NBA free agency officially opens, which means if you get bored, and you'd have to be bored to do this probably, but if you set your phone to notification for social media for Shams posts, used to be Woj, now it's Shams, your phone is going to sit there and it is literally going to be jumping around on the table, vibrating between 6 and like 6:06, because they're going to be alert after alert. This team signed this guy. This team signed this guy. And it's going to come like an avalanche. I was just on this trip, one of the places that I went also, Niagara Falls. And if you've not been to Niagara Falls, and I had been as a kid, I had not been as an adult, more on the experience later. But watching the amount of water and the force that it falls before you is truly staggering. It's mind-blowing. And you're like, where does all this water come from? I mean, it really is magnificent and amazing and awesome. But the force of the water and the rapidity with which it goes from just looking like a calm, cute little like stream to all of a sudden this avalanche of force. That's kind of what the next 6 hours from now, exactly 6 hours from right now, you're going to be right in the middle of the avalanche of news of teams signing this guy and that guy. And, you know, the big one so far, the big story is that DeAndre Ayton, Portland did not pick up their option on DeAndre Ayton. Now, you hear that and you say, well, Jake, I'm a Pacer fan. It's the last day of June. Why do I care about DeAndre Ayton? I don't know that you do, except for this. Number one, there is history with Indiana. We know about the Pacers offering him an offer sheet and then Phoenix matching that. I still have my theories on that. I think there might have been some chess game going on there. But does Indiana look at DeAndre Ayton and say, you know what? We can be more competitive this upcoming – now, I don't think this is their thought process, by the way. Humor me here. I'm throwing this out in case this is a possibility.
Have a heart.
That's right. I just switched to Sanka. Is it possible that the Indiana Pacers look at DeAndre Ayton? Can you look up DeAndre Ayton's age for me, Eddie? I remember interviewing him when he was coming out of Arizona. He was the presumptive number one pick in the draft. I was at the Final Four. I want to say that was in 2018. That would be 8 years ago. He's got to be somewhere around 29 or 30.
No.
Younger?
He's the same age as me.
DeAndre Ayton?
Mm-hmm.
How old is he?
26.
Okay. That's of intrigue. Because if you are the Pacers and you look at Miles Turner, who's been a wonderful player, and by all account, there was no chance he was not going to resign here. But if you look at it now, is there the possibility that you look at it and you say, whoever we have at center next year is going to have to be there for a year where Tyrese Halliburton's not playing and probably needs to be more of like a half-court set center, but then also can run with Tyrese Halliburton once he comes back and we know what we have here with this group and the style that we play. Is it possible that the Pacers look at Miles Turner and say, this past year in the postseason, and I love Miles Turner. I'm speaking strictly presenting another side of it. Does Indiana look at Miles Turner and say, we need to be more physical and have a center that is more versatile in having to be physical when he needs to be physical and be finesse and run when he needs to be finesse and run? And if that's the case, is there the chance that they now say, if we're going to go into the tax, we're going to do it with a guy that not only fits with what we want to do when Halliburton gets back, but fits with what we want to do without Halliburton and allows us to still be competitive? I think Turner does as well. But is there the possibility that they say, if we're going to go into the tax, we're going to go with a guy that clearly they had interest in at one point originally? I don't think that's the case, but I don't think it can be ruled out. But that's the first bit of news that's come out about DeAndre Ayton. Outside of that, there hasn't been a whole lot of seismic activity. That's all going to come like an avalanche coming up here at 6 o'clock for the first 10 or 15 minutes. And then inevitably and invariably, the teams that are not overly active with that, their fan base are then going to be jumping up and down and saying, what are they doing? Why are they sitting on their hands? This is ridiculous. I'm so tired of this franchise. I'm tired of the way they run things. And there were Pacer fans that used to say that, right? And lo and behold, the Pacers are the talking point of the NBA. One of them. And I'm telling you, I couldn't believe the number of people that commented to me and said yes, sirs, to me in New York. I mean, maybe Knicks fans would know, but the Pacers are on the map. They're on the radar. That's one of the things that we're going to talk over the course of today, including what you would do if you're Miles Turner. Miles Turner is a very interesting key piece of wood in this Jenga puzzle. No question about it. The Fever. Big game for the Fever. That is coming up tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Is that correct, Eddie?
That is accurate.
Eddie Garrison, who, of course, is the pregame and postgame host for Indiana Fever broadcast that you hear. They are in the WNBA Commissioner's Cup Championship, taking on the very, very good Minnesota Lynx. Caitlin Clark is still probably game-time decision. She is day-to-day with the injury. The Fever have a chance to get a little extra money here, obviously, with this. This is the in-season tournament, if you will. The record does not go for or against their record in the regular season. Stephanie White going to join us 2 o'clock on the program today, at 2 o'clock today. And this is, Eddie, even though it doesn't go for their record, it still is, as you continue to build a program and a franchise, if you will, with a star player in Caitlin Clark and trying to get those other pieces around to all kind of mesh together, this is another stage for them to play on that gives them that opportunity to, again, test themselves.
Absolutely, Jake, and it's a little bit of a playoff type of game for them to get that experience as a group. Like, how does it look when you've got money on the line like they do? $500,000 is what each player can win tomorrow night if they are victorious. Now, it'll be interesting to see if Caitlin Clark plays first and foremost, but if she doesn't, does the continued energy that Ari McDonald brings carry over in that game? I forget what day that was. Saturday, maybe Friday night. Yes, Friday night. She makes the start instead of Sydney Colson, and they play the style in which they want to play with Caitlin Clark starting, because Ari McDonald much wants to run up the floor, push the pace, push the tempo. Very defensive minded, not afraid to generate turnovers with steals, deflections, and that sort of stuff. So it'll be fascinating to watch. I think the Fever are going to treat it as a playoff game, and so will Stephanie White, and I'm sure she'll echo that when she joins us at 2.
I just got this text, by the way, okay? Hey, Jake, how drastic do you think the Pacers roster will change? And then to show me that this person is listening to the show, which I greatly appreciate, they sent a screen grab of the dash in their car showing that they're listening to the program, right? And my answer would be, I think the Pacers roster may change, but not near as drastically as you need to change the clock on your dashboard because it says it's 10:56. Now, I'm not saying you, Eddie. I'm saying this, the text that was sent to me. I appreciate they sent me a screen grab of their dashboard. Looks like they also could use some Windex on the actual screen where you punch the buttons. Don't punch any buttons. I want you still listening to the program. But it does look like it says 10:56 as the time. And this is somebody locally, so they need to adjust their clock there. I think the Pacers roster, where I think there could be changes, it's strictly financial. 2 seconds before Tyrese Halliburton received that pass, I would have said this roster is totally intact for next year, and they push all in. And they make another run at it. Halliburton's injury does change things because it not only, you have to take into consideration that what you are paying for to a large extent is a bunch of people to hold serve until you get that final piece back again. And that may be 18 months before it's at full effectiveness. So is it worth spending the money to just simply keep things status quo and hold serve for that final piece? And if that's the case, if part of holding serve on that is bringing back Miles Turner, then you have to ask yourself whether or not, A, you want to go into and pay the luxury tax. For those that are unaware, the luxury tax is the penalty that a franchise needs to pay by going over the designed salary cap. You can go over the salary cap, but you basically pay then to the NBA additional money, of a fine, if you will.
Now, the other part, too, Jake, it only matters where they end the season at their payroll. So if they enter the season over the luxury tax, it does not matter. It's where they end the year.
Right.
So they can start over the tax by paying Miles Turner and whatever else they want to do. But let's say they're, 20 through 40 games and there's not really any direction on where the season is going. Then you can trade possibly like an Obi Toppin or somebody to alleviate some of that salary to stay under the tax by the end of the season.
Now, with that, okay, again, I go back to, Eddie, there would be, theoretically, whatever you begin, this Pacers team, if you're going into the tax, it's because you are keeping a core intact to welcome back your leader when he comes back and make one more run at it. So theoretically, your payroll is, in fact, going to be the same at the end of the year as it is to begin the year, unless you shed some of the complementary pieces. But the thing that makes this team so unique, so special, and made them so good this year is the fact that even their complementary pieces are core pieces to an extent. They go that deep. Now, for the roster itself, what they need to ask themselves, and Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan and Ryan Carr and Ted Wu, Kelly Crosspop, I assume they are all going over this in great detail. Rick Carlisle, obviously. And that is, if you want to bring in Miles Turner and re-sign him, which, again, as that ball was moving to the pass of Tyrese Halliburton, at that moment, there was no doubt that Miles Turner was coming back as a Pacer. But once that injury takes place, it changes your timeline. And like I mentioned, do they then say, if we're going to pay and go into the tax, then we'll go with a player that is more two-way for us or more physical for us or carries us by? Or do they say, we'll get Turner, who is he's still a young player, but by NBA standards, he's an older player in terms of experience. If you are going to either of those situations, if you don't want to go into the tax, but you do want to retain Miles Turner, re-sign Miles Turner, then you start to ask yourself about pieces, because you also have to plan for the eventual re-sign of Aaron Nesmith, Andrew Nembhard, and now you have a question to answer about Benedict Matherin, who you can make an offer to right now. Okay? When you do that, does that mean that there are players that have already gotten theirs that you then have to evaluate? And Obi Toppin would be one of those. I love Obi Toppin. I don't like Obi Toppin. I love Obi Toppin. I love his game. I love his versatility. I love his unselfishness. I love his demeanor. I love his leadership. And most importantly, and I think this is important, Rick Carlisle once said that Obi Toppin is the finest human being he's ever coached. Like the best person he's ever coached. He's that kind of a guy. I don't know Obi Toppin. I've never sat here and pretended because I host a radio show that means that I am that tied into. But I certainly very well know people that are around him all the time. And Obi Toppin brings nothing to a roster or a locker room that is detrimental. Nothing. He does whatever's asked. He's fine doing whatever's asked, and he wins you games at times. Now, he was poor in their elimination game in Game 7. But you heard him say part of that is because it was psychologically in his head of the Halliburton injury. It changes everything. That injury changed. We've gone now from, with the Tyrese Halliburton injury, we've gone through the mourning period. That will never totally heal from the disappointment, not only, as I talked about, for that game, but also for Tyrese Halliburton. And you understand the pain for Tyrese Halliburton. And you feel for what he has gone through and what he is going to go through and the disappointment there. And Tyrese Halliburton needs to come back on the pace that is best for Tyrese Halliburton. But now that we've gone through that portion of it, there is the reality of the business side of basketball, which is, where do you as an organization go from here? And as an organization, the Pacers then ask themselves, okay, what do you do? And the reality is that injury changes a ton, because it changes not only how you're going to play this coming season, but it changes from a certainty about the next two seasons to now a hope, but not a guarantee. And so you want to be creative, and they have a very good guy on their staff who does nothing but cap stuff. But when you factor in that Nembhard and Nesmith are both on very franchise-friendly contracts, they're going to get theirs eventually. And then you have the case of Benedict Matherin, which we'll get to in a minute. But that's an interesting one as well, and an additional curveball for certain. It will be a topic throughout the course of today. Also, Eddie, did you see big trade in the NFL?
Oh, my goodness. The Pittsburgh Steelers and the Miami Dolphins were very active, Jake.
The Pittsburgh Steelers and the Dolphins have agreed to a deal, okay? The Dolphins are trading Jalen Ramsey, who is a wonderful talent, but apparently, like, is it just me? Ramsey is a great player. And maybe it's at no fault of Jalen Ramsey, but it seems like Jalen Ramsey doesn't play well with others. How does a guy with that much talent consistently get shopped around?
Well, he wanted a raise first and foremost.
He's a great player. Great player, right?
He's okay now, I think. I think he's on the back nine.
That's fair. That's fair because he's an older player. But the Dolphins are trading Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, who's a pretty good player in his own right, to Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh is sending Minka Fitzpatrick, who's a very good player, and a pick swap to Miami, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Dolphins – so here's my question. Which of these two franchises does it look like is the one that is saying our time's right now?
Pittsburgh.
Because Miami seemingly was right on the cusp, right? 2 years ago, Miami was one of those teams that we were talking about. If Tua could stay healthy, of how fast they were, and they look how fast they play, and Tua's got all these weapons, and they're going out and they're getting receivers, and boom. But now Pittsburgh, and yes, Pittsburgh, one would assume, is going all in because they know they've got Aaron Rodgers. And the one thing we know about Aaron Rodgers is that he is the world's biggest pain in the backside. But you, at least for the 1 year you get him before he starts doing television shows talking about his coffee enemas and the other weird things he's doing. Before, if you try to cash in on that, you got a very short window and you got to do it now, right? And he's already said, like, this might be my last year. You mark my words. By November, I'm going to predict right now. That by Thanksgiving time, Pittsburgh, we're starting to wonder if they have buyer's remorse.
On Aaron Rodgers?
Yes. Now, maybe he did play at a high level when the last time he was healthy, he threw up good numbers, but they didn't necessarily translate. I just think the guy's a great talent. He's a great talent. He has a great feel for the game. He has a great vision, etc. But at some point, the drama constantly surrounding him eventually begins to negate any of the potential that you have in what he can do for your franchise coming in. Eddie, when I walked in the studio, I was happy to hear that not only and see that it looked good, but you guys did two good shows. You obviously had fun while I was away. You did not miss me at all, did you?
No. I know you missed me, so it's okay.
I didn't, but I brought you back a souvenir.
Yeah, so you clearly missed me, and you were thinking about me the entire time on your trip.
It's more this.
Did you find the Rhode Island red chicken?
Okay. Thank you for asking. So I was in Rhode Island. We were hell-bent. It's the red chicken is the official bird of the state, right?
Yep.
Okay. I did notice this. Hard to get a chicken meal anywhere in Rhode Island. Right? I don't know if, like...
So what did you consume?
It's like trying to get yourself a burger in New Delhi. Like, don't try, right? I was only in Providence. I was in Rhode Island for a day and a half. And we'll get more into this coming up in about 15 minutes. But I will tell you, I have the trip that I just went on, I was in Providence, I was in Syracuse, I was in Buffalo, I was in Springfield, Mass, I was in Boston, I was in Erie, Pennsylvania, I was in Dayton, I was in Columbus, I was in Cleveland. I have a new underrated city that is so like moved very high up my list, and a state that moved extremely high up my list. In Adamsville, Rhode Island, there is a Rhode Island red chicken monument. Now, I did not make it to Adamsville, okay?
I'm very upset with you.
But they have an actual monument to the red chicken, which is a breed of chicken, which is the official state bird. The only thing I saw was a restaurant, and I find this to be very offensive. But they have a restaurant that is a red chicken restaurant. Now, if it's the state bird, how in the world are you going to have a restaurant named after it? You can't be serving these, right? Don't go. Listen, when it comes to the red chicken, it's like Chick-fil-A in Rhode Island every day Sunday. Not serving it. State bird. Can't eat it, right? But they got a restaurant named after it. I did not go to the monument, but I did go to several cool places and brought you back a souvenir. But thank you for doing the shows on Thursday and Friday to let me get away a little bit. When it comes to Benedict Matherin, is it possible that the Pacers are going to let him get away? And I'll let you know what I'm talking about, because I think when it comes to Matherin and his future as a Pacer, there is one area where Matherin might be holding all the cards. I'll explain next. I have a gift for Eddie Garrison. Give that to you coming up here in about 10 minutes. Recap the trip and the weekend because it was very sports-oriented over the course of the weekend. Not usually the case with trips that I take, truth be told. But
especially with Mike Byron.
Yes.
A lot of it's searching for his car keys or his wallet.
Now, you want to know the irony here?
You didn't lose anything, did you?
For those that don't know, when Byron and I do this trip, they're not twice. Mike Byron and I do a road trip every year together where we fly to a city, we rent a car, and we drive home. And we go to all kinds of different stuff along the way. On 2 of the previous trips, we arrived at the airport, and Byron announced that he had left his wallet at home. He had his driver's license so he could travel, or his passport, I should say, but he didn't have his wallet. So I had to pay for everything. Then one of the years, he lost the rental car keys. This year, he picked me up to drive to the airport on Thursday. We leave his car at the airport. We rent a car where we landed and then drove all the way back, and we drive to the Indianapolis airport to return the car. So I had my keys because I locked my place. When he came and picked me up, threw them in my backpack. I don't need them, obviously, for the rest of the trip. When I got home yesterday, I realized, and I have a spare key at my house, so it wasn't a big deal, but I realized I didn't have my keys and my wallet had fallen out of my – now, he's getting all over me because I left my wallet in his car on the drive home yesterday. I'm like, yeah, but dude, I had my wallet on the trip. That's the point. You didn't have to pay for anything because I paid, I paid for everything. But my keys are missing. I've called every hotel. I called the rental car place everywhere. No one has my keys. Total mystery for what that's worth.
They're in the Niagara Falls somewhere.
We did go to Niagara Falls, which is fabulous. Benedict Matherin, more on the trip coming up in just a minute, and I'll give Eddie his souvenir as well. Benedict Matherin is an interesting curveball when it comes to the Pacers. Stephanie White going to join us 2 o'clock today. We'll talk about the Fever. We'll get the latest on Caitlin Clark. Is she in or is she out for tomorrow? We will ask the head coach of the Fever that 2 o'clock today when she joins us live. The Matherin is in a situation where the Pacers can offer him an extension right now, okay, as he's entering the final year in his deal. And if you're Benedict Matherin, again, as that ball was in the air, being passed to Tyrese Halliburton, in that moment, Matherin seemed like a very prime candidate to, hey, you know what, this is a guy that has some trade value. Maybe they can trade him, free up some cap space, and when they do that, then they can re-sign Miles Turner and you push all in, and that's the one guy that you'll miss, but it seems like he doesn't necessarily – he had his moments for sure, and he's a wonderful player, just not always a player that plays the style that Indiana plays. Then, as soon as Halliburton caught that ball and the injury takes place, the injury changes everything. Now, all of a sudden, the power is in the hands of Benedict Matherin. Because if you're Indiana, it's probably in your best interest to extend him right now for twofold. Number one, you're going to need him to score the basketball for you next year and do so a lot. You're going to need him probably to start games for you next year and do so a lot. And you are hoping that in doing so, that when Halliburton comes back, if you have team run it back in 18 months, that you now have a guy with all kinds of experience in all kinds of different situations on your roster that's now the most dangerous sixth man in basketball. What a win and what a coup. But if you're Benedict Matherin, moments before Halliburton caught that pass, Benedict Matherin looked like he might have been odd man out. Halliburton caught that pass. The injury happened. Injury changes everything. And all the power now shifts to Benedict Matherin. Because if you're Benedict Matherin, do you not say to yourself, wait a minute, I can take the Pacers extension offer right now. But I know that I'm getting ready to enter into a season where I can log a ton of minutes, start a ton of games, and score a ton of points. And if I'm suddenly a 72-game starter that averaged 18.5 points and 6 rebounds a game in the NBA, now all of a sudden I've talked myself into I'm a $20 million a year guy somewhere. It's a little bit like when Lance Stevenson entered free agency. And everyone laughed at Lance Stevenson because he took lesser money to go to Charlotte than he was offered originally in Indiana. But the difference was Charlotte was offering him a 4-year deal and Indiana offered him a 5-year deal. And Lance Stevenson and his agent knew that the new television contract was going into play in 4 years, and thus the salary cap was going to explode. And that summer of when that happened, it was when everybody wants to get on board because it's like Oprah. You get a max deal, and you get a max deal, and you get a max deal. And the new TV money's there, and everybody is rolling in the dough. And Lance Stevenson wanted to make sure that he was a free agent in the year that was happening, so he took one less year from Charlotte and less guaranteed money in the moment, banking and gambling on himself, and he lost because it did not work out. He did not play well in Charlotte, and thus he did not become a coveted guy. But if you are Benedict Matherin, you look at it and you say, okay, I can take this deal right now with Indiana and lock myself into a good salary for the next 3 or 4 years or whatever they're going to offer me, or I can decline it, stand pat, and gamble on myself that I'm going to be healthy and productive over the next year, and then all of a sudden somebody's going to come along and they're going to say, Indiana can't afford you now, brother, because we've got 25, 28, 20, whatever it might be, to throw your way. And there, I think Benedict Matherin now suddenly and interestingly enough, he holds the chips. And the Pacers have to determine what they want to do. I will give Eddie his gift and recount a couple of Indiana Tide things, sports-related, from my trip. Other side. You know the source of this road trip by now. The Kevin Turhan Donner Memorial Road Trip that my buddy and I do every year. Turhan was the best of all of us. He was the smartest guy that I grew up with. He received a full academic scholarship to Vanderbilt. He was a quadruple major at Vanderbilt, and I believe graduated a semester early. Got a full academic ride to the Indiana University School of Medicine, and then worked at Texas Oncology in Austin as an oncologist. And obviously, tragically, passed away a number of years ago and of cancer, ironically enough. And when he did so, he had a brand new car that he had left for his parents. And so my buddy Mike Byron and I flew down to Austin, Texas to retrieve his car and drive it back for his parents. And we just, the whole time, we're telling Turhan stories and laughing about how if Turhan was in our, as my buddy Dewey says, if your parents knew Turhan was out with us one night, your parents didn't worry at all. And we listened to music Turhan liked to listen to and told stories and whatever else, and just relished in our memory of the enrichment of our life through his contribution. And so shortly after that trip, Byron and I kind of at the same time said to one another, we should do one of these every year where we just pick a city, fly to it, rent a car, and drive home. And we do it in honor of our friend, and we do it every year. And we have fun with it, and we soak in as many atmospheres as, environments and different things as we can, and take in, everything from stopping to seeing, those books you see, like weird roadside attractions, those kinds of things. This year, the city we chose was Providence, Rhode Island. We flew to Providence, and let me tell you, Providence, Rhode Island, and the state of Rhode Island immediately skyrocketed to the top of my list of most underrated city and underrated state that I've been to. I've been through both, but I've never, done them, right? Byron has a friend, Dan Force, who's a native of Indiana that now lives out in Rhode Island. Great guy. He met up with us, and we went out for, beers and just getting the lay of the land and getting something to eat. My friend Sarah Fraden, who played squash at Brown, we had to go to the Brown squash courts and find her photo on the squash team, which I did find.
Did you partake? Did you play?
I found the courts. They looked like racquetball courts. Did not play. But the Brown campus was awesome. Providence was very cool, and the Brown campus is amazing. Then we went to Providence College. We found Austin Crosher's Hall of Fame plaque. I didn't want to tell him this, but they had stacked up a bunch of cafeteria tables, and we had to pull them back a little bit to find Crosher's plaque. Didn't want to mention that, but that was the case. But we did find it. And Providence College is also very neat. Met up with Will Fleming, who used to work the Indianapolis Indians radio broadcasts here in Indianapolis and has become a good friend. He is now the play-by-play voice of the Boston Red Sox, lives in Providence. So we went over to Will's house, hung out for a little bit, and then Byron and I went to Fenway. It goes without saying, Fenway was awesome. Sweet Caroline in the 8th inning was awesome. They got beat 9-0. Watching the very irritable Red Sox fan next to me occasionally screaming up at the scores box was awesome. We then went from Boston and drove to Springfield, Massachusetts, got up in the morning, wore Pacers shirts, went to the Basketball Hall of Fame, which is, I would say, of the Hall of Fames, the Basketball Hall of Fame is kind of more of like, I felt like, at least the displays that were there when I was there Saturday. It was like a children's museum display of basketball. A lot of put your hand up against this hand and try to put these shoes on, that kind of thing. But it is obviously a historical museum of the game of basketball. They have these round table things in front with different, and they had one for Bob Knight. I sent a picture of it and sent it to Pat Knight, which he wrote back and said, I designed that. Oh, okay, that's cool. We got our picture. They had a huge display of Reggie Miller. Byron and I were both wearing our Pacer T-shirts.
There was no profanity with that text, by the way?
There was.
Okay.
Yes. Matter of fact, I'll let you see it. The mural of Reggie Miller, Byron and I got a picture taken wearing our Pacer shirts. And the guy there was a guy right there. We're like, hey, can you take a picture for us real quick? And the guy looked right at us and goes, there's no way. And I looked, and he was wearing Knicks shorts. And I'm like, okay, that's fit. And he's like, I'm just kidding. He was a cool guy. I took the picture. The number of people that commented to me about the Pacers, not at the Basketball Hall of Fame, but the next place we went. We left the Basketball Hall of Fame, drove from Springfield, Mass., the just under 3 hours to Cooperstown, New York. And Cooperstown, New York is amazing. I had never been there. It's a beautiful area. It's very quaint. We went to the National Baseball Hall of Fame, which is amazing. I mean, it is massive. You could spend 2 days there with the number of displays and archives, and I mean, it's incredible. The number of people that commented to me about the Indiana Pacers was unbelievable. The number of people that came up to me to say something and, man, you can't believe, you guys should have won. I mean, it was amazing. The number of travel baseball teams, the Baseball Hall of Fame was Byron and myself, and then 5% was like old, true baseball historians, and the rest of it was 12 to 14-year-old travel baseball boys wearing socks with slide flip-flop shoes and their baseball uniform, and the overweight, overbearing alpha testosterone-induced travel baseball dad wearing Oakley blades. That was basically the entire audience at the Baseball Hall of Fame. But it was cool. And the area is beautiful. So we left Cooperstown. We then drove from Cooperstown through Syracuse. We went to the Carrier Dome, which now has a different name. Went through the Syracuse campus, which was really nice. Went from there to Buffalo and went to Niagara. We got to Niagara Falls at 10:30 at night. And we basically were like, let's just go see it, even though we had both seen it before. I'd never really seen it from the American side. I couldn't believe it was packed, even at 10:30 at night. And they have lights on it, which make it amazing. But you walk up on this railing, and the river is literally, I mean, it's right there. Right there. And the railing's like a waist-high railing, and the water's right below you, and you are 15 feet to the right of where it then plummets. Like, oh my gosh. I mean, I couldn't believe how, I hate to say it that way, but how trusting they are. Let's just say that. Niagara Falls was beautiful. Then we went to go check out the new stadium of the Buffalo Bills being built, which looks like it's going to be amazing. And we walked into a bar across from that in Orchard Park to get something to eat because we're like, we got to at least get wings. It was like midnight. And we were on our way then to a hotel that we'd reserved in Erie, Pennsylvania. But we walked into this bar restaurant right across from the Bills Stadium. The two stadiums are right there. The new one is right across from the old. And there's this little bar, and we went in to get wings. There's a group of 5 guys sitting there, and we're still wearing our Pacers shirts because we'd been to Springfield earlier that day. And some guy starts blowing me grief about the Pacers choking. Choke artist, the Pacers, da-da. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. And then I stopped. I'm like, oh, dude, you're a fan of the Buffalo Bills. Like, honestly, of all franchises, right? And so I said to the guy, I go, look, I'd rather be 3/4 from a title and having a snapped Achilles be the issue than snapping a table before going and getting blown out of the building like in the first round of a playoff game, right? Or like, having Patrick Mahomes own you again. And this guy, all his buddies were like, yeah, I mean, hey, it's not wrong. They were pretty good-natured about it. In the entire trip, one of the most profound places that we went was, and I know this sounds weird, in Providence, the first place that we went because it's right next to the airport. Some may remember in 2000, I believe it was 2003 or 2004, there was a terrible fire at a nightclub called The Station with a concert for Great White, which was a hair band in the 80s. They had a concert. They had pyrotechnics at the bar in this concert. It caught fire, and it engulfed instantly. And this bar had 462 people in it, 100 of which perished. And I'm talking the bar was in full flames within like 2.5 minutes of the concert starting. It was horrific. The area where that bar was, which is right next to the airport, is now a park. And they have the most tastefully done memorial. When you walk into this park, it's outdoor. There were 100 people that were fatally injured. And they have, I think it's 10 different circular areas where the circle is made up of marble stone, like marble headstones, if you will, with engraved the face of, the name of, and the birthday of all 100 people. And Byron and I actually went and walked through every one of those and looked at every one of those people. Because even though I have no connection to Providence, I have no connection to Great White, I have no You saw that, and you felt like then you knew every person there. And it was extremely moving. It was extremely tastefully done. And I think about the State Fair collapse or the Ice Capades or even the Ramada Airport. There have been things in this town that we hide away and almost don't want to talk about. And I understand that because sometimes those things are hard. But at the same time, it celebrated and brought back to life all of those people who I've never met. But I saw one guy that was born 3 days after me, for example. The vast majority of people, their birth dates were around my age group for the obvious reasons, because they would have been, in their early, mid-20s when this happened at the same age as I. But it was truly a moving place, and I thought for the city of Providence, extremely well done. But, Eddie, I wanted to bring you back a souvenir. You received one phone call from me while on vacation. Do you recall?
Yes, I do recall.
And do you know what it was?
Yes. I remember the question.
What did I ask?
You asked me what my number was growing up, like what I played baseball in.
Okay, and that was it, right? It was literally, we were on the phone for probably 20 seconds, right?
I was in Bloomington at IU at Buffalo's when you called me.
Okay, that's a great place, by the way. So, do you probably figured out why I was asking, right?
Well, I figured you were at the Baseball Hall of Fame. That's when you called me.
Correct. You have never been to the Baseball Hall of Fame, right?
No.
Baseball, a significant sport in your life, right?
Yep.
Your favorite sport?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought this was cool. I apologize that the color scheme of it is not the color scheme you would choose, but there were only two options. One was natural, which I thought were bland. The other was this color scheme. So,
okay.
Having said that,
I'm intrigued to see what this is. Oh, another bat. Let's go. I like this. I like the black. What was the other one?
Just natural wood.
Oh, yes.
So
that's cool. Thank you.
So the bat, go ahead and explain what the bat says, please.
It says Cooperstown bat, and it's got Cooperstown, New York, made in USA. It's got my name and the number 21 on it. And then at the end, it says National Baseball Hall of Fame.
So that is from the National Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah. That's
so
cool.
I figured
Thank you.
That's the closest you'll get to the National Baseball Hall of Fame in terms of induction. And I have no idea what one does with a bat like that, but I thought it was cool.
I'll get like a bat holder and mount it up on my wall.
There you go. So that is your bat from Cooperstown, the Cooperstown Hall of Fame. We'll probably talk a little bit more about the trip over the course of the show, but if you've never been to Cooperstown in particular, it was cool. It was definitely worth the trip. There were tons of Little League players there, or like travel baseball teams there for tournaments, which would be awesome, and there were tons of kids having fun, which was cool. It was, I mean, kidding aside and flippancy aside, it was a very, very cool place to be. The trip was very cool, and Turhan was a huge baseball fan, and a huge Pacers fan. So in that regard, I felt like we did him right. Mike Chappell going to join us next. Big news in the NFL today, and the Colts, now that we know what's going on with their schedule for training camp, we will talk about that. Stephanie White, 2 o'clock, we're going to find out Caitlin Clark for tomorrow night, in or out. It's one of the things we'll ask in an hour. So we know that the Colts training camp will have, I believe, just one joint practice with the Green Bay Packers. There also will be a night practice at Grand Park. Eddie's down here swinging this bat all over the place. Eddie suddenly looks like Genghis Khan in the mall scene at the athletic store of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. You breaking everything over there?
No, I was just trying to prop it up. They will also have one with the Baltimore Ravens, but that will be in Baltimore.
I love Baltimore, by the way. It's another great city for the road trip. Joining us now on the Ryan Geist Brewery guest line, he, of course, was CBS 4 and WXAN Fox 59 to talk about not only that, but today's big news in the NFL. Mike Chappell joining us. Chap, we'll go away from the Colts for a second here. I know that you said you saw Pittsburgh in the move that they made, sending out Minka Fitzpatrick and a pick swap to Miami and getting back in that trade Jalen Ramsey, notably, and Jonnu Smith, who's a pretty good tight end. And you believe that this is Pittsburgh saying, you know what, we got Aaron Rodgers for 1 year, so we're going to test it out and Hail Mary it. Is that essentially how you interpreted this?
I'm not sure how else you read it. And again, it's like the situation here with the quarterback. If Rodgers is what level do we? Okay, if he's average, they might be pretty good. But yeah, it's not the same level. But remember back in when was it 13 or 14 when Grigson went all in with Trent Coles and Andre Johnsons and all those guys.
Eric Walden and Ricky Jean Francois and that whole group, right? Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's like, oops. So, no, I don't know how I should read it. And if I'm Tomlin, at some point, it's crazy. He's a notch above Jeff Fisher to where he's almost at that Mendoza line where it's 500. Now, of course, with the way the league is now with 17 games, it's tough to go 500. But go back and look at Jeff Fisher where he's 7-9 and 9-7 and 8-8. And Tomlin's not had, it's amazing, no losing record in 18 years, which is amazing. And the Colts have won a playoff game since he has. His last playoff win was 14 or 15 or 16, whatever it was. So at some point, there's got to be some urgency to be more. And I would argue they've had some stud players, some T.J. Watt for crying out loud. I mean, oh, by the way, they need to re-sign him with all that they've done. So, yeah, I just have to look at it like, okay, this has got to be our year. We got Rodgers done, and it was ridiculous. They played that dance with him for so long. When it was that wink he was going to sign with them. But I don't know how else to look at this. And this is, we were joking with some of the guys that cover the Colts is, if you're a beat guy for the Steelers and Dolphins, you hate this. They're probably on vacation. They're probably at Magic Kingdom with their kids, and this goes down. So, but at least they're doing something. I applaud them. It's funny. One team, Pittsburgh, is going all in my mind, and boy, it looks like the Miami is like dumping players. So maybe we see an early rebuild in Miami.
It kind of surprised me with Miami, Chap, because didn't it feel to you, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but it felt to me at least that prior to, and I know that especially when you're talking about neurological injuries, it's tough. But when Tua was playing at a healthy level, there was a window there, correct me if I'm wrong, say 18 months ago or so, where it felt like Miami was this like high-flying, fast-paced team that was right on the cusp. They were like the Pacers of the NFL, if you will, right?
Right. And that next step is to do something in the playoffs. And, you know, they've got high-profile players, at least on offense. So, yeah, I agree. They're sort of in that limbo of what do we do? You know, when you sign, if I'm not mistaken, Tua's got one of those contracts that's $50 million or whatever it is. When you've got that guy, I don't know how you talk yourselves into, well, we need to rebuild or you know, we need to get younger and all that, and it's tough to do when you've got that quarterback with that contract. So yeah, it's really strange. It's kind of fun, as a matter of fact, to sit on the outside looking in and say, what are they doing? At least these guys, the guys that we cover, aren't doing that. The Colts did their stuff early, which is what which is what you want. They went out and got Jones. They went out and got the safety in the corner, and then you get the tight end in the draft. So yeah, I've always thought that any news in the off season, and I mean the NFL's small off season, last 2 weeks of June, first 2 weeks of July, it generally isn't good. This is different because these are proven players switching. So this isn't nothing. This isn't signing some guy who's a special teams player that might be able to play linebacker or safety, whatever. This is a significant move. And again, it just seems like this is Pittsburgh saying, okay, here we go. But boy, they better take care of Watt. I don't know how he would be if they can do the franchise tag. Sometimes these guys have clauses that can't do that. But I wouldn't think it'd be healthy to put Watt on the franchise tag.
Chap, was there anything with, and I know that it's been obviously a couple of days now since this has been released, and I sometimes look at things like that and kind of roll my eyes at like, well, the NFL's done a masterful job here of keeping themselves in the forefront of discussion during the dog days. But that said, was there anything about their training camp schedule release or just layout that was of note to you?
Two things. Only 13 days, only 13 practices. That I need to go back and look, but normally they're up there 18, 19 days. I need to go back and look. I need to look. And also, I not double check because I'm on vacation and I don't care. But when they said this is the first ever night practice at Grand Park, I thought, no, it's not. It can't be. But I think we've had those 6 o'clock practices that bleed into night. So, okay, we'll go that way. But no, other than that, it seems like camp's getting shorter and shorter, which is probably where the NFLPA wants it to go. And again, the fact that they've got the 2 joint practices, one in Baltimore and one with Green Bay. I'm always curious now as how will those joint practices impact participation by frontliners in the game. Generally, when they've had 2 practices with Chicago, Detroit, Cincinnati, whomever, the starters don't play much. The Colts, with 1 practice, it might be different. And the Colts are in a little bit different position when you got an open competition at quarterback. And I'm telling you, when you're playing Jones and Richardson, they're going to play behind the frontline players. You just can't put a guy out there and say, oh, here's your number 3 tackle that we hope makes the practice squad. So it's a little different. But the brevity of training camp, here I go dating myself. I do it all the time. I'm having lunch with Rick Venturi tomorrow, and we'll have war stories. But I remember when they went to camp in mid-July, early July, and there were 2 days. And one time they went to camp like July 2nd.
I mean, don't you remember? And listen, I don't know which of the 2 old guys on the Muppet Show you want to be, the left or the right, but I'll be the other one here, right? But don't you remember? I recall, for example, when my first real big opportunity or job was in St. Louis, and I covered the Rams, and it was in Macomb, Illinois, and so I go with the crew from where I was working in St. Louis, and we drive up to Macomb, Illinois, which was in the middle of absolute nowhere. And the players are showing up, and they're carrying pillows and sleeping bags and whatever else, and they look like kids that are reluctantly going away to art camp when they're 8 years old. And, and it was like this, I mean, you could just tell there was no life about it, and it was literally like watching guys reporting for the worst, like seemingly 6-week stretch of just grueled, hot, sticky Junction Boys level stuff, right? And maybe my mind is embellishing that now in retrospect, but it seemingly was like a month-long affair, was it not?
Well, yeah, and part of that was, again, there was a 6-week camp one time. Again, I think they were playing maybe the Hall of Fame game or whatever. But again, they went to camp like July 2nd or July 3rd, whatever it was, and that's like Venturi and I always laugh, is like Pagano would say, this is gonna be the hardest camp we've ever had. Then the second day, like all these veterans that they signed, the Trent Coles and Andre Johnsons and Frank Gores, they had a vet day off. Second day of camp, I'm thinking, yeah, okay. So it's different because back in the day, players didn't do a ton of off-season workouts. They just didn't. I'm not saying they all had to have jobs and all this, although back in the day they did. But now these players, they'll take 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off, and the season's over, and then they're back working out. They just are. So that's one reason that they don't need quite so much training camp. Now, Chris Ballard and Steichen would disagree because they do have to evaluate, and they do have to cut down on how many tight ends, how many corners, how many, all that. They need that. But it's totally different. And if you remember, gosh, it was last year, 2 years ago, there was I think the NFL always floats these trial balloons about totally revamping off-season to where there was almost no off-season. And I mean, at the complex in April and May, and then the expanded training camp to where they report a week earlier, or maybe 3 weeks earlier, and then there's a ramp up period. I'm not sure we'll ever get to that. I think coaches really, really value that. I think it's an 8 or 9 week off-season program. It's different. It just is.
I'll never forget, Chap, when I was covering the Rams, and we're in Macomb, Illinois, right? And one day, unexpectedly, and I mean, and it was this euphoric thing for everybody, media included, Mike Martz gave, and I can't remember if it was Mike Martz or Dick Vermeil, but I think it was Mike Martz at this point, but he gave everybody the afternoon off. They were supposed to have 2-a-days, and they gave them the afternoon off, but then, of course, they got film session at 7 or whatever. Well, Macomb, Illinois, there's literally nothing there, and it's 3 hours from St. Louis, so there wasn't time for anybody to leave and go do stuff and come back, right? I kid you not, the little video game area and concession stand at the Macomb Walmart, it was like Kings Island for millionaires. I mean, you look over and like Marshall Falk's playing the Money Crane game, and Torrey Holt is getting popcorn, and Kurt Warner's buying candy bars, and like the people of Macomb are just going in to get their their daily goods. Yep. And because there was nothing else to do, and the thought of training camp, it was like it was like being a kid and having the substitute teacher wheel in the VCR for the day. I mean, it was the greatest thing ever, but it just was a different feel and a different time. Now, I want you, Chap. I don't know that you and I, Mike Chappell, our guest on the Ryan Guys Brewery guest line, CBS 4 and Fox 59. I don't know that I've ever actually asked you to verify my memory on this, Chap, but it perfectly ties into the time of year we're in right now. I want to know if you remember this the same way.
Okay.
In 1998, in the summer of 1998, I was working at Channel 6, and truthfully, I don't even know that I really worked there. Ed Sorensen, I had called Ed when I was in the 6th grade and said, I want to be a sportscaster. And Ed said, well, have your parents bring you down here. And I never left. I just shadowed and was a mini-me of his for 15 years, and he gave me carte blanche, okay? I was John Feinstein to Ed Sorensen's sports office of A Season on the Brink, basically. And eventually I got to the point where he got me a job at Channel 6 using his influence, where I was the lowest guy in the totem. But my job literally was to tear scripts and mix coffee and, whatever, right?
Gopher, yep.
A gopher. But I was thrilled with it. I wanted – my foot was in the door. That's all I cared about. Well, I was so excited for the Brickyard 400. It would have been I think the 5th running of the Brickyard 400 in 98. And back in those days, Chap, if you remember, every TV station did 5 a.m. until race time, breakfast at the Brickyard, extend. Oh, yeah. I mean, it was massive. All hands on deck, right? And so I was so excited for that. And Ed comes to me and says, listen, you're not going to be credentialed for the Brickyard. You're not going to the Brickyard. And I was devastated. And I said, why? And he said, well, the Colts have a scrimmage in Champaign, and we need somebody to go over with Dennis Goins and just get sound bites after that. But everybody's going to be at the Brickyard. So I tell people to this day, Chap, I went to Peyton Manning's first ever view of an NFL defense other than his teammates in 1998 when the Colts and Rams did an organized scrimmage in Champaign, and Peyton Manning was throwing footballs for the first time against another NFL defense. And when he got done with that, You and I were two of like four people that he talked to because every other media outlet of Indianapolis was already tied down with the fifth running of the Brickyard 400, which was the can't-miss signature marquee event of the time. Do you recall it that way at all?
Yeah, I don't, because I thought I remember they had my memory from that time. I forgot. I didn't know it was in '98. But that Jim Irsay, God rest his soul, came over to talk to the media that day, and it was hotter than blue blazes. It was unbelievably hot, and that's the stadium, University of Illinois, right?
Yes.
It was like metal and concrete, and it was like a microwave oven. And so Jim comes out and is talking to us, and he's wearing his suit, a white suit, and he had like a pale blue shirt on with a tie. And by the time we were done, it was dark blue because of the sweat. And one of the guys, whether it was Pete Ward or one of the PR guys, kept handing him a towel to dab off. And if I've got my years right, when we went over there, the Rams quarterback was Trent Green.
That's correct. And then he got hurt, and Warner took over.
Yes. And we all talked to Trent Green for a story, and it was great and all this. And then, like 2 weeks later, he got hurt in preseason, didn't he? And all of a sudden, they go to some guy named Kurt
Okay,
Warner.
I got to think about this, though, Chap, because Warner, the year – so did they do back-to-back years with the Rams?
I don't remember.
I think they did.
That's the problem.
I think they did. So the year that – okay, so now that I think about it, okay – when Manning did, the one that I'm talking about was 98, and the Rams were still using Tony Banks.
Okay.
And then Tony Banks brought his two pit bulls to practice one day, and they attacked Dick Vermeil, and that was the end of that era, right? And then in 99, they did it again, and Trent Green was the quarterback because they ousted Tony Banks, brought in Trent Green, and then, yes, it was year two. It was a 2-year deal.
Okay.
So Manning's first year was the first of a 2-year thing with the Rams, I believe.
Okay.
But yes, point taken.
And then whatever year that Tim Couch was number one, was that 2000 in Cleveland? They went to Cleveland and did a scrimmage with them. But yeah, so these scrimmages, joint practices, go way back. But Champaign was always great. And what sticks in my mind, it's one of the all-time great trivia things, is how they thought Trent Green was the quarterback and was going to be their guy, and it turned out, Kurt Warner was. And what people forget is that in '99, it was an expansion year when Cleveland came into being again. You had to leave X number of players eligible for the expansion draft, and the Rams left Kurt Warner available because they didn't know who the hell they had.
Isn't that unbelievable? And the Browns in that, would that have been when the Browns took Kelly Holcomb, right?
Probably. He came from here.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. The Colts left Kelly Holcomb unprotected. Now, interestingly enough as well, so I ended up moving to St. Louis and covering the Rams in the heyday of that. And Warner, so they win it all. They come back the next year. They started out 6-0. Kurt Warner was on pace to throw for like 6,500 yards. I kid you not.
99. Okay, that was 99. All right.
And he broke his thumb. Kurt Warner broke his thumb against Kansas City, and Trent Green had to take over. And Trent Green took over, and they were okay with Trent Green, but they weren't great. And they lost that game to the Chiefs, and then they lost. The Rams did. They went 3-7 down the stretch, got into the playoffs, and lost to New Orleans. And then they ended up. Trent Green went elsewhere, and was a decent quarterback, but nowhere near Kurt Warner. Nothing like Kurt Warner.
Did he go to KC or Washington?
He went to KC. I think Washington is where Green had gotten enough starts to get on the map, and that's why the Rams signed him. And then he went, and then he ended up going, ironically enough, to Kansas City and playing for the Chiefs. It was a good player.
It's just right. Oh, no question. No, he's kind of like Alex Smith. Pretty good player. And it was just the timing of things, and again, Kelly Holcomb was the quarterback for the Colts until Manning signed his rookie contract. So the first week of training camp in '98, it was Kelly Holcomb. and then Kelly goes out for practice on the first day of the second week, and Peyton just signed. And Tom Moore basically called Kelly Holcomb back and said, "Son, you're done." And Peyton walked out, and Peyton took every snap, that he could. But it was great memories, but they're so different. I just can't stress to people. You and I have talked how different training camp was then and now, and I'm not saying one's better, one's worse, but when I hear coaches say this is going to be the hardest camp we've had, I'm thinking, yeah, baloney. It's not, because it can't be, because the rules don't allow it. But I'm looking forward to it, and I hope. It's funny, during this downtime, some teams have put out, well, we're going to have 4 open practices, 5 open practices. The Colts practices are open. They all are.
Right.
There is no. I hope they never change. I don't think they will. Jim Irsay understood the value, and I think the daughters do too, the value of connecting with the fan base.
Yep. And a lot of fans, Jim, or Chap, excuse me, a lot of fans that truthfully, that's their chance to, let's be real.
90%
I mean, some people,
of the fan base, 90% of the fan base, they can't afford season tickets.
Right.
Maybe one game a year. This is their chance, and I'm telling you, players, they'll sign autographs. They've got their helmets off. You can yell at them, and they can't hear you, but, hey, Pitt, he'll look at you and, wave. But I just think it's valuable, and I hope that Chris Ballard understands that as well. You got to connect with the fan base, mostly with the fan base that can't be there on Sunday. And this is the time that it happens, and they understand that, and I hope they always understand that.
Okay, lastly, Mike Chappell, our guest, Ryan Geist Brewery guest line. You obviously are a voter for the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton.
Yep.
Have you been to this weekend? I did. I actually went to the Boxing Hall of Fame. It was closed by the time we got there, but I walked through and did the full experience for the Basketball and Baseball Hall of Fames in Springfield, Mass. and Cooperstown, New York, respectively. Have you done either?
Yep. No. I bet they're cool.
They're very cool. There is one thing that the NFL does better than all of them when it comes to the Hall of Fames, and that is, if you go to the football one first, of the 3 of them now that I've been to the 3, there is nothing more impressive than the shrine room for football with the busts and the way that it's lit and the dark and I expected, Chap, the Baseball Hall of Fame is far superior to either of the 2 in terms of displaying, explaining, and celebrating the history of its game. And it has the most history to celebrate, admittedly. But it's fantastic. And it is Americana through and through. But the Baseball Hall of Fame, the plaques, you hear so much about, Wade Boggs, is he going to go in as a Red Sox or a Ray? And, whose hat is he going to wear, and et cetera.
Right.
And if you're used to the football busts where literally the busts are literally the life-size of the head of the individual for the most part, right?
But you go in as a guy. You go in as you.
Correct. And you go in
the NFL.
And in the NFL, it just lists your teams of service. It just has your face and whatever.
Right.
But going into the enshrinement plaque area of Cooperstown, and I'm curious if anybody who's been to the Baseball Hall of Fame agrees with me on this, because maybe it's an unpopular opinion. I thought the plaque room in the Baseball Hall of Fame was very underwhelming, because the plaques are literally like 18-inch by 18-inch plaques, and the face is the size of like the palm of your hand, and you know what I mean. And like after you've been to the football one, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, that's it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Basketball, all they have is the names on a glass wall, but then they have video boards where you can watch videos of any person that is enshrined. So that's cool. But I just thought the Baseball Hall of Fame was superior to all of them, but the enshrinement hall is underwhelming. And I'm curious if anybody else thought the same. But football does it best.
One thing with your NBA ties, tell the NBA to take some notes from the NFL. Having major trades during the draft is asinine. You have the big trade on Game 7, and then you have like 2 days before the draft. Spread things out, for crying out loud, so you can steal the attention. I thought that was, and then too, if you draft a guy, he's got to be your guy. This baseball cap stuff with
I mean, Kawhi Leonard. There's a baseball hat, a picture of Kawhi Leonard wearing a Pacers hat, right?
I mean, come on, get it right. That's just crazy. It's just crazy. Just crazy.
By the way, I like how you said with my NBA ties. Like I'm going to make a phone call here and just get this taken care of, right? I got all kinds of polls.
This is we're the 2 old guys up in the balcony. So
that's right.
Nobody listens.
All right, chap. Enjoy vacation. Appreciate the time as always.
Talk to you next week.
All right, thanks. Mike Chappell joining us, Rhinegeist Brewery guest line. Truth IPA, by the way, fabulous from Rhinegeist Brewery. And that's the truth about a lot of things that went down in the old days of training camp, if you will, with us two old guys talking about it. But what about winds of change and new stuff coming? Is there something new that could be coming to Indianapolis, and the winds of change of it are a little bit cold? I'll tell you what that is, because this has just surfaced in the last couple of days, and it's very interesting. And Steph White joining us coming up at 2 o'clock. Stephanie White, head coach of the Indiana Fever. Caitlin Clark, in or out tomorrow night? We're going to ask her that in 32 minutes. Rumors are swirling. Rumors are flying around. This is a great song, by the way. When on this NBA free agency day, with 4.5 hours until NBA free agency officially gets underway, and the Portland Trail Blazers have decided that they're going to let DeAndre Ayton, a player that the Indiana Pacers once made an offer sheet towards, and Miles Turner is set to become a free agent coming up at 6 o'clock. Benedict Matherin could be offered an extension by the Pacers if they so choose.
Aaron Nesmith also can be offered an extension if they choose.
I would think they'd have to lock him in if they would like, right? Or that they would like to. But with all of that, Eddie Garrison, if you do, please, if you could for me, and this is a breaking news rumor only, but if you could please play the breaking news sounder. According to Frank Cervalli of Daily Face-Off, which I assume, I don't know Frank, I'm not familiar with Frank's work, but I would assume that Frank is reputable because he has been quoted by Sports Business Journal, which is very reputable. The National Hockey League is now looking over 5 prospective cities in terms of an expansion franchise. Austin, Texas has thrown its hat in the ring for this. They have become the 5th. And among the cities that are listed, none other than Indianapolis, Indiana, for the National Hockey League. Now, question becomes, is in fact Indianapolis joining, by the way, Atlanta, Houston, and New Orleans, as well as now Austin? Two-part question for you, the sports fans of Indianapolis. Is this a hockey town? And if it is, if you had to choose, would you rather Indianapolis put all of its chips in the basket of the National Hockey League or Major League Soccer? What I find interesting is the expansion fee for the MLS. So in other words, the fee that an expansion franchise has to pay to get into the NHL, or excuse me, for the expansion fee for the NHL is $2 billion. That's
NHL or MLS?
This is the expansion fee for the NHL.
Okay.
So I misspoke there. $2 billion for an NHL hockey franchise. That part to me is fascinating because it would almost entirely seem that would mean that it would have to be an out-of-market ownership group. I don't want to misspeak here, and certainly the only thing I know less about than business is money. But in the state of Indiana, there would be a very limited pool of people that could put together a $2 billion expansion fee upright on top of the amount that it would cost to have a franchise. But there has to be a group somewhere. I had mentioned this earlier. We are now in an era of professional sports, and the Denver Broncos are kind of the blueprint on this. The television money in sports and the value of these franchises are such that it's priced out, for the most part, individual ownership. I mean, yes, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Mark Cuban, those guys have the kind of capital to put together a $4 million offer for something. But for the most part, the days of business guy who has an empire that is indigenous to Atlanta, Salt Lake City, Houston, whatever, just one person to have that kind of money. If you look at the Colts, for example, and I can't remember what the amount was that Bob Irsay paid for them, but the valuation of the franchise, and by that I mean the value that was determined from a tax standpoint upon Bob Irsay's passing in 1996 or 7 or whatever it was, to now, I mean, it went from like 350 or 400 million to $4 billion.
Like, look at the Lakers. $10 billion.
Yes, and I mean, so these franchises are worth so much that it's usually capital investment ownership groups of like 20 people from all kinds of different places that collectively own a team. I was just at the Boston Red Sox game in Fenway on Friday night, and a lot of the chatter amongst the fans that I was talking to was they feel their frustration is the fact that the ownership group now for the Red Sox, it's an ownership group that has investment and interest in a number of different sports properties around the world. And so they're like, how much do they truly care about the Red Sox versus this is just like a check and a bottom line and whatever else. But to me, what is the most fascinating is this. And what I'm about to say, a lot of it is educated opinion and observation. But it is my opinion. I'm not reporting anything here. It's strictly my tea leaves opinion. In this town, what happened is you had an ownership group for soccer that initially joined and brought a soccer franchise to a lower tier soccer league in the Indy 11. And the ownership group of the Indy 11, a large motivation for growing the brand of the Indy 11 soccer franchise was to try to get a license or a contract from the state or city to build a major league level soccer stadium in Indianapolis because the ownership group of the 11 also is in the large construction business. And so, and I'm not bemoaning that. I'm not damning it. I'm just saying I believe that was a motivating factor in getting into one business venture as a conduit towards getting into a bigger business contract. The Indy 11 has done a very good job of building a fan base within the market and, becoming part of the Indianapolis sports landscape, but that level of soccer does have a ceiling on how much it can penetrate into the market. It is my opinion that what happened is there was discussion with the Indy 11 and the city of Indianapolis, and at that time, the mayor then had someone come to him during NBA All-Star Weekend and say, we believe that we might have an avenue or a path towards getting the MLS to Indianapolis. And we would like to put you in touch with the commissioner of MLS. And I believe that somewhere in those discussions, it was implied to them, the MLS is interested in Indianapolis as an expansion city, but we would do so only if you can get a different ownership group other than the one that currently is involved in Indianapolis. And therefore, the city pivoted away from the Indy 11 Park project and went to an outside investor out of market that was facilitated by, I believe, ownership groups of like Herb Simon said, look, I don't want to own an MLS team, but I can put you in touch with someone who may have interest. And the city then believed that they had someone out of market that had enough interest and capital that would be interested in investing in Indianapolis as a soccer city. And then when Indianapolis went back to the MLS commissioner, the commissioner said, okay, this is an offer and a growth that we would have interest in. And the city thus pivoted away from the Indy 11 Park and put their interest and their initiatives into a separate bid eventually for MLS. The NHL discussion, the only reason I bring that up and mention that level of footprint of the history of it all is because if the NHL is interested in expanding into Indianapolis, the expansion cost is the same. It is believed that an expansion MLS franchise would also be somewhere in the $1 to $2 billion range. And I believe that an ownership group, I just don't see Indianapolis getting both. The NHL may be more advantageous because you already have a facility, because theoretically they would play at Cambridge. Just as I know the St. Louis Blues, when I was in St. Louis, played in the Kiel Center, which was also used for SLU basketball. It was a basketball arena and a hockey multipurpose venue. So maybe the city pivots away from the MLS ventures and now puts their efforts and their interest from a financial or investment standpoint into the NHL instead. The other variable is the NHL would play in season for the most part with the Pacers. That becomes a challenge. And Indianapolis, between the Pacers and the Colts, already has the fan base interest in terms of that time of year. MLS obviously more advantageous because you're playing in times where there's less sports focus in Indianapolis. But either one would be very cool. I'm not a huge soccer fan, but I understand and respect the fact that for younger people in particular in this country, most of them are. The MLS has done a great job of becoming, even though I don't believe a franchise in the MLS yet has yet to turn a profit, there's groundwork there. The NHL is, I think this is a hockey town, but I think at this point, hockey fans in this town are diehard loyal people, and I love them. And I love going to Fuel games, but I don't know how many there are and whether or not there are 18,000 a night for that many nights. Eddie, you would love it, right? Would you stay with the Kraken or would you become a Racers fan?
That's an excellent question. I don't know. I would probably be both.
Stephanie White going to join us about 18 minutes from now. Caitlin Clark in or out tomorrow. One of the things we're going to discuss. So we'll be playing regularly when the Racers come back to town, right? Okay, here's the thing. So if Indianapolis somebody said, like, look, if Indianapolis gets a hockey team, expansion franchise, NHL, it would basically be like the Columbus Blue Jackets. Except for, I don't know that I totally agree with that, because if you look at the Vegas Golden Knights and the Seattle Kraken,
Yep.
Those teams were set up and designed to be competitive right away, right?
Seattle made it to the playoffs in their first year, and so did Vegas.
Right.
I think Vegas may even made it to the Stanley Cup final. I'd have to go back and look.
Vegas won the Stanley Cup, didn't they?
In their inaugural season,
No, I'm saying like within like their first.
Oh, they just won it. So Florida the last 2 years. Before that, it was Vegas.
Yeah, and how long has Vegas been a franchise?
Not very long. When I was in college, so at least around 2018.
My understanding
19.
is, and listen, for me to sit here and expound upon being some sort of hockey expert would be disingenuous. But my understanding is that when they have had expansion franchises in the NHL, that the combination of the expansion drafts and then the lack of does hockey have a salary cap? I think there's like no salary. The payment structure is favorable for young franchises versus established franchises, which helps them.
I'm not sure in that regard, Jake, but to answer your question, 2017, 2018 was the first year for the Las Vegas Knights.
Man, I'm getting old. What year did they win the Cup?
That would have been 22.
Doesn't that seem cruel that, like, Canada hasn't won a Stanley Cup in 32 years and Vegas just rolls in and wins one? You know what I mean? I do. So I asked a Twitter poll if Indianapolis was granted an expansion franchise in one of, but not both leagues, which one would you prefer? Would you prefer it in the NHL or MLS? Now, right now, nearly 800 people have voted. I just put this up like 20 minutes ago. Not even that. Yeah, no, 45 minutes ago. Nearly 800 people have voted so far.
23, by the way, on the Knights. I forgot that Florida's made it three straight years.
78%, Eddie, which do you think in this town, 78% of the 800 people that have voted which way, NHL or MLS, that they would like to have in Indianapolis?
NHL.
That is correct. That's correct. Now, would you call them the Racers or the Checkers? Or the Ice?
I wouldn't want to call them the Racers because then you really would get Racers and Pacers in the month of May.
You say you would or would not want to?
Would not.
Okay. So you wouldn't go with the heritage of the former World Hockey Indianapolis Racers and Wayne Gretzky and that whole group with the red, white, and blue and the logo? Now, you could have the Checkers, which were a minor league team, a AAA affiliate of the New York Islanders. Or you could go with the Ice, which the Indianapolis Ice won a Turner Cup in 1990. And then the Indiana Ice were basically a semi-pro team. But would you go with something totally different? I think most people would prefer Racers. Checkers is pretty cool, though, don't you think?
The amount of things you could do from a game ops standpoint, if you made it to like the playoffs, obviously you could do checkered grids with shirts and stuff.
Oh, unlimited, right? I mean, back then the Indianapolis Checkers were orange and blue because they were connected to and affiliated with the Islanders. But the Racers, I think most people would go with Racers. Just because those red, white, and blue sweaters were cool, man. I mean, they were cool. The logo is cool, and Gretzky played for him. You get Gretzky to come back and, like, drop the puck for the first game. Here's the thing. Indianapolis, when it comes to NHL expansion, is going up against Austin. What did I say the other cities were? I think New Orleans was New Orleans one?
Yes.
Let me look at the who did I okay. how do you battle against Austin, Texas, first off, right?
We're closer to Canada. There you go.
That's your selling point?
Oh, yeah. We're closer. Why not Indiana, Jake? That is my selling point. Why not Indiana?
Okay, the other cities, hold on here. The article, I kid you not, like, Seattle, okay, Seattle has a team, right?
Yeah, the Kraken?
Yeah, Seattle Kraken. That's right. I mean, yeah, of course. I'm looking at a thing here, some article that says Seattle would also be in play. What? Seattle's already been taken care of. Okay, Atlanta, Houston, Indianapolis, New Orleans. Okay, New Orleans, no chance, right? New Orleans got no chance. They got no Fortune 500 companies down there. It's a great city, but it's also a city that economically and population-wise is still recovering from Katrina. New Orleans got no chance. We're taking New Orleans. What are they going to be, the voodoo? They're out, right? New Orleans is out. Okay, fine. Atlanta's already, they've had their shot at this, have they not? Didn't Atlanta just have a franchise? They're like now the Winnipeg Jets or something else like that. Atlanta, done, out, gone. Now you're dealing against Houston and Austin. Well, that's pretty stout. Houston, big city, like third biggest city in the country, massive, but hot, right? I mean, you got a power outage, and all of a sudden you got guys swimming in a lake. So Houston we're going to take out. Austin is the challenge here. He's got all the tech money. Everybody, their brother lives there. It's very trendy. So Indianapolis is battling with Austin. That's what I've concluded. Stephanie White is the head coach of the Indiana Fever. They will be battling with Minnesota tomorrow night, as a matter of fact. And there are a lot of question marks about who may be there and who may not. We will get into that with her next. And I'm going to say yes. If we ask Stephanie White what awesome classic Colt 80s comedy this song is like the opening song to, do you think she'll know?
I don't know.
I mean, I realize that, the Fever are getting ready to play for the WNBA Commissioner's Cup, and there's a lot to talk about. And she probably, I don't know how much she watches of movies, but she joins us now on the Ryan Guys Brewery guest line. All right, Stephanie, Coach White, we will begin with this. We got the Beat by the Go-Go's. When you hear that song, is there any 80s trashy comedy that immediately comes to mind as the opening scene?
You're putting me on the spot here. I can't. The 80s, I was still kind of young.
Yeah, I know.
So no, it does not. Nothing comes to mind. What was it?
To be fair, it's probably more of like a coming of age movie for like totally sophomoric teenage boys. But Fast Times at Ridgemont High, you have or have not seen it?
Oh, I've not seen it. I've heard of it, but I have not seen it.
Well, let me tell you something. If you ever do see it, I'm going to be a spoiler alert here. It did not win an Oscar, which I think was a snub, but it did not. Okay, let's get right to the big topic here, and we'll go in order on a number of things. Thank you for joining us, by the way.
Of course.
Let's begin with the availability of Caitlin Clark for tomorrow night's matchup with Minnesota. Where do we stand right now?
Yeah, we still don't know. I mean, it's a day-to-day thing. Did some stuff at practice today, making sure we don't have any setbacks, and revisit tomorrow at shoot-around and see how she feels. Obviously everyone wants her to play, but at the same time for us, being cautious and making sure that we don't put her in a position that harms her ability to play long term. We got to be smart about this, and so we'll reevaluate it tomorrow morning at shoot around.
When you have a player that is obviously as much a focal point as Caitlin Clark is for your roster and the way that you want to play, right? There's a balance there, is there not, Coach, in figuring out, in taking advantage, quite frankly, of, letting other people understand and figure out how to play without her on the floor, but then at the same time not wanting her to push too much to come back? Does that create a challenge for you in trying to find the balance of the good, if there's any to come from it, in a situation like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge is that she has such a high usage rate when she's on the floor, and the way that she makes everyone else better when she's on the floor, the actions that we run and the shots that her teammates get when she's on the floor versus off the floor is very different. And so, trying to manipulate to still get high quality looks without a player of her magnitude and the gravity that she has on the offensive end of the floor is challenging. That is the single biggest challenge. I think certainly when it comes to other people making shots, stepping up in big moments, having the ball in their hands from a decision-making standpoint, gaining confidence through that without Caitlin on the floor is good, because we're going to need that. We're going to need our depth to continue to be solid. We're going to need that down the road. But the challenge is, because she is so ball dominant and does so many things in our offense, that we don't have the same gravity.
I guess, and I say this also because, and I hate to say it this way, but the reality is the Pacers maybe are going to have this experience as well. Different scenarios, I realize, with Tyrese Halliburton and Caitlin Clark. But if a team operates a lot differently with a key cog like that on the floor, is there a danger or a risk in the team getting too used to the style that then has to be played without that player, and thus having to completely retweak everything once that player returns? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if danger or risk is the way that I would frame it. I think it's just there's a comfort zone that comes with having a player of their caliber on the floor. And then if you do get into a rhythm and you do figure out how to play without them, there's a little bit of a comfort zone there. I think that, all things can be true. Obviously our team is better when she's on the floor. Obviously the Pacers are better when Ty is on the floor. But I also believe strongly as a coach that the more your team can grow without having that primary playmaker on the floor, the better your team is going to be in situations where opponents try to take that away.
You are 16 games into it. Stephanie White is our guest here on the Ryan Guys Brewery guest line. Through 16 games, you are what percent of sure of who and what your team is versus where you thought you would be at this point through 16 games?
Oh, geez. Yeah, I mean, I think again with the absence of Caitlin, it makes it probably more of a 40% sure, 60% unsure, as opposed to having the continuity that you would normally have with your top, 6, 7 players in the lineup, and that goes for when C was in and out, and when Sophie was in and out. Sophie's just again working her way back as well. I mean, you feel a little bit more sure this far into the season when you've had a core group that you're working with. So I think our best basketball and our best continuity is yet to come when we get everybody on the floor, we get everybody healthy, and we really get to start rolling.
What was Stephanie, the situation with DeWanna Bonner, who I know you know well, came from Connecticut? There was a lot of, I think, excitement from fans about what she might mean to your team, and it seemed like a mutual parting of ways there. But what was the situation that led to moving on from her?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a lot of factors. I think the biggest thing is that she didn't feel initially like once we were on the floor that it was a good fit. And it's different. Even though we're the same system, it was different certainly from Connecticut, where we were a much slower paced team, a much more deliberate offense. And then when you're playing with players like Caitlin and Kelsey and AB, who can really play at a fast pace, who can read and react, and everything is coming very quickly. It's much less predetermined, I just think that some of those things come into play, and the idea of what it looks like on paper and what it looks like in reality. We see that in professional sports a lot. I think at the end of the day, for me, being someone who has a great relationship with DB is you want her, and she's a Hall of Famer, right? She's a future Hall of Famer. She's been such an impact in this league. Is you want her to be happy, and so the mutual agreement to be able to allow her to go find what that looks like, and for us to be able to move on with the core group that we have, I think was important.
I have been really impressed by, and it goes without saying because we know what a great player she was even when she entered into the franchise. But to me, from the outside, and then I want you to critique this observation because it may not be accurate. Aaliyah Boston, to me, has been so impressive because she has been able to deliver in different roles that have been asked of her in terms of who's on the floor, in terms of personnel or style, and whether they are games that I'll say are Aaliyah Boston games where you go through that, or games where she is then being asked to do different things to contribute when it's someone else's game in that particular night. Is that a completely armchair quarterback observation?
No, I think it's fair. You think about the way that she was utilized in college, primarily back to the basket, getting touches on the interior, playing through her every possession. And that was a lot like how she was used in year one in her rookie year in the W. And then you bring a player in like Caitlin, and so she's predominantly used in the two-man game and really adjusts to that. And then you bring our system in where we use her, yes, in the two-man, we use her some back to the basket. We use her as a hub because she's such a good facilitator, and she's such a high IQ player and makes reads and gets to next actions. And I think that each of these roles that she's had, she's really embraced that opportunity. I'd still like for her to get more three-point shooting opportunities and for her to take those. I think that's the next step in her growth. But I feel like, she's had the ability to play in these different roles. And I think you're seeing her have career numbers, career efficiency, because of her ability to be flexible and because of her high IQ.
Now, I'm going to give you you don't even need a pass on this. It's understandable if you've never seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High, okay? But Eddie Garrison here, Eddie, who I work with, who is the pre- and post-game host for the Fever broadcast on radio here that you hear on these radio stations, including tomorrow night for the WNBA Commissioners Cup between the Fever and Minnesota. Coach Eddie has never seen Shawshank Redemption. Now, on a 1 to 10 scale, yeah, I'd like to know, and don't give away any spoiler alerts here, but on a 1 to 10 scale, I would like to know how egregious you consider that somebody who's been on this earth for more than a quarter century has yet to see Shawshank Redemption.
That is absolutely a 10 out of 10 egregious. That is one of the best movies. Now, Fast. What did you say? What is Fast Times
at Ridgemont High? Yes.
I feel like I deserve a pass on that, but Shawshank Redemption? Are you kidding me? It's
okay.
a classic. Eddie, you got to go watch it.
Top 5 movie all time, correct? At least certainly in the last.
Top 5 movie all time.
Yes. Now, did you know?
100%.
I was on a road trip over the weekend, and on the way back, and I've been to this place many, many a time, and I know that your schedule is very busy, and certainly it's going to be for the foreseeable future here. But if you ever have the downtime, in Mansfield, Ohio, is in fact the Mansfield, Ohio Reformatory, which served as Shawshank in the movie, and it is closed now and has been turned into nothing but a museum to the movie itself, and you can go through the entire movie was filmed within the confines of it. So there's your day getaway
Wow,
tip
I didn't
for
know
you.
that.
Yeah, which is very cool.
I didn't know that. Another Mansfield, Ohio trivia. Joy Holmes Harris, mother of Gary Harris, produced first All-American, is from Mansfield, Ohio.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's cool. And, I will say, so Gary Harris, everybody thought he was going to Purdue, right? I mean, wasn't that like the foregone conclusion?
Well,
And then, Michigan State, but,
well, Izzo.
That's right, the Izzo magic, right?
Yep.
Hey, Coach, I want to get into this particular with the WNBA Commissioner's Cup and everything that's led into this. I know this does not go plus or minus towards your regular season, the actual record of your schedule, but just the benefit, if you could, how much has it been beneficial to have a benchmark and a goal, I guess, within season? Or is it also because of injury something that we could look back on later and say, man, it would have been nice to have like that night off?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of benefits to it. I mean, certainly there's a pride benefit to it, winning a championship and being able to be part of a first for the Indiana Fever franchise, no doubt. A financial benefit for our players, which is added motivation. And I think the other thing for us is to continue to be able to use this as a measuring stick, right? Minnesota's been the most consistent team in the league. We get an opportunity to use this as a stick. But yes.
Now, hold on. Here's what we got to do. Now, Coach, hold on. We lost you for just a second there. I need you to move 8 steps to your left and then grab that aluminum foil you were holding on to for the first couple of minutes, right?
We don't have those old towers, right, that we used to have.
That's right.
They had to be changed in a certain direction.
All right, put her on hold for just a second, Eddie, and we'll check back in just a second here and see if the connection does improve. But I want to remind everybody again, Fever tomorrow night taking on Minnesota. Again, Minnesota coming in at 14-2. This is a benchmark. If you're just joining the interview, Stephanie White had said that it is still day-to-day in terms of Caitlin Clark's availability for this, but this is not unlike you obviously had the play-in tournament for the Pacers that we saw Indiana get to the finals of against the Lakers in year one of that. This is the WNBA equivalent. So we have her back. Coach, again, if you could, just the overall benefit of this and also kind of giving that benchmark for your players and going up against a really good team in this game.
Yeah, an opportunity, number one, for us to win a championship and be part of a first for the Indiana Fever franchise. For players, the opportunity to win some extra money, an obvious added benefit. But I think for us as a team, a measuring stick. Minnesota's been the best, most consistent team in the league. It's an opportunity for us to have a measuring stick. And, you mentioned the kind of balance of you could have a little bit more rest or play an extra game. And much like Indiana All-Star, or much like WNBA or NBA All-Star too, right? It's like you get an opportunity to compete at the highest level, to have a lot of fun, to get rewarded in a way. But you don't get that time off. So, I think for us, we're looking at it as a positive, another opportunity to compete, another opportunity to get better. An opportunity to win a championship for a franchise.
And Caitlin Clark, we now know, will be a captain for the WNBA All-Star Game, but still a lot to be done between now and then. And again, as Coach White had mentioned, day-to-day, they will determine tomorrow during shoot-around her availability for that game against Minnesota. Coach, appreciate the time as always, and best of luck in this WA Commissioner's Cup game.
All right, thanks, Jake.
All right, Stephanie White joining us. Going to try to do that each week, as a matter of fact, try to have Stephanie out at different points to talk about the Fever and what they have upcoming in their schedule. But that's the big news, of course, the fact that, and I like what she said about DeWanna Bonner as well. Just, look, the offense and the way they run in Indiana, different than what they were running in Connecticut, and just realized it wasn't necessarily a fit. Of course, Ari McDonald is back in the mix for Indiana with that roster spot. So a lot to discuss with the Fever. And yes, back to, and Eddie, I know I make a lot of it, the fact that you've not seen Shawshank, but
I still think it's part of your fault too. I mean, you've only been saying for 2 years now we're going to have a watch party at Casa de Jake, and there has no been Casa de Jake watch party.
You know what? You've been to Casa de Jake, so maybe
That's
I could
Casa de Boo.
that's right. I could just have it queued up, and you could watch. That way, I don't have to sit with you for 3 hours, but you can watch. I'm telling you, it is a. You know what's here's what's interesting to me about movies and Hollywood and sports in general. So I mentioned off the top of the show the fact that, I did my road trip, and thank you for filling in on Thursday and Friday.
No problem.
Anytime. And not burning things down. And the trip that I do each and every year, I wish I could do more of it. There are so many cool things to see in the United States. And this year, Byron and I, the trip that we did, we flew into Providence. And we landed in Providence, which I was blown away by the city of Providence. I thought it was downtown Providence, Rhode Island, looks a little bit like downtown Carmel, except for that the buildings in Providence are authentically architecturally old. And Carmel are new, obviously, but very clean, very easy to get around, not a big city at all. Extremely quaint. All of Providence was very quaint and charming. Norman Rockwell-ish. I loved it. I loved Providence, Rhode Island. I had never really been through there. But we landed in Providence, and we went there, and then we went to Brown University and Providence College. And when we went to Providence College, we went into the Alumni Hall and saw Austin Crosher's Hall of Fame plaque. And we went to Brown to find my friend Sarah Fraden's pictures in the athletic facilities there for the squash team she was a part of. And then, as I mentioned, I went to Fenway for the very first time for a game against the Blue Jays. It was sold out. We got to go down for batting practice, which was cool.
How was Fenway Park?
I had been to Fenway. I had just never been to a game there. It's obviously a magical place. I mean, the area around Fenway, it's the Fenway neighborhood. The area around the park is fantastic. And what's interesting is the streets bordering the park are part of, you have to have a ticket to get into them. That's part of the park itself. So when you get your ticket scanned, there are the first base line and the third base line, essentially the two streets along the way there, which are nothing but like bars and shops and that kind of thing. That's all part of once you get in, so you can go in and out of the park into those places and the gift shop and all that. It's all right there. The neighborhood around it is magical, just like Wrigley Field. It's very similar to Wrigley. The Red Sox got absolutely, they lost 9-0, but the atmosphere was phenomenal. And, Sweet Caroline, when they do that, it was great. And to be a part of that and to soak that all in and see the pregame and see all the fans and soak it in. And then we went from there to Springfield, Mass. The next day and went to the Basketball Hall of Fame. And I watched the video with Mel Daniels and Slick and obviously Reggie Miller, George McGinnis. They have a number of different displays within the Basketball Hall of Fame of different players and things like that. And there wasn't a lot about the Pacers, but Byron and I wore Pacer shirts because we went to go see the Reggie Miller mural there. But we went from the Springfield, Mass. Hall of Fame. The Basketball Hall of Fame, by the way, is literally like in a mall. Like you walk in, and there's like a Subway on your right, and then like a Stone Cold Creamery, and like a bar, and then you walk into the entryway of the Basketball Hall of Fame. We went from there to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And in Cooperstown, we're wearing our Pacers shirts, and the number of people that came up to me and because we were in Pacers shirts and wanted to talk about the Halliburton injury and how exciting they were and how bad they felt for the Pacers at the Baseball Hall of Fame. And the Baseball Hall of Fame, and Oscar Charleston's there, and there were great. The Baseball Hall of Fame is truly amazing, and Cooperstown is incredible. Cooperstown, New York, you would only go to if you're going to Cooperstown, New York. I mean, it's not like on the way to anything, but it is. The area is beautiful. The town is incredibly charming and inviting. There were a ton of travel baseball kids there playing at Doubleday Park, which is cool. And it was truly magical. And then we went from there, and we went to Syracuse, and we saw the Carrier Dome, and then we saw the Syracuse campus, and we went to Buffalo and saw the new building of the Bills Stadium. And then on the way back, driving through, Byron had never seen it, so we went through Mansfield so he could see the Shawshank Prison. And we parked, and it was absolutely packed. It was as crowded at the Shawshank Prison as it was the Basketball Hall of Fame. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a prison that closed in 1996 and was used – actually, it closed before that because it was used – the movie was in 93. But the movie was 30 years ago. The prison just sat dormant for 25 years, and then 5 years ago they turned it into a museum of the movie. And it was absolutely packed. And there's just something unique in our culture about movie and sport and the way that they connect with us and the way that we relate to some stories more than others and some teams more than others. You know, the Indiana Pacers were just a team that got hot. It all came together for them, and they had an incredible, miraculous run to the NBA Finals. And they got essentially 3/4 away from winning it. And maybe people just connect with Halliburton's injury or disappointment or downfall. But they were the NBA runner-up. They were the NBA runner-up. You know, a couple of years ago, the Miami Heat were the NBA runner-up. A couple of years ago, several times, the Cleveland Cavaliers were the NBA runner-up. The Phoenix Suns were the NBA runner-up. But you move on. It's like a movie that you go to and you go, yeah, it was okay. But certain movies, like Shawshank, stick with people. And people relate to it, and they love it, and they can't get enough of it. They watch it over and over and over because every time you watch it, you see something different. And this Pacers team kind of feels like that. Because some movies you watch and it's routine, and other movies you watch and you go, that didn't get the accolades it was supposed to get. But, man, that was really fun to watch. And going on this trip made me proud to be a fan of the Pacers because so many people said that was a team I watched and that stuck with me. That was a movie I watched that I really liked. And I didn't really like the ending, but that movie was so much fun that it's still one of my favorite movies. And that's truly what this Pacers team felt like because it was Byron and I both commented when we got back. We're like, I can't believe how many strangers commented and connected to the fact that we were wearing Pacers stuff and came up to talk to us about the Pacers everywhere that we went. It was pretty cool. And then, but that's, we live in a society and in a culture where sport and film are our getaways. They're our getaways. They're what we do to escape. You see people and you go, hey, so what are you watching right now? What are you streaming? What are you watching now? And we all have our lives and we all have our challenges and we all have our, complications and our current concerns and our worries and our stresses. But we turn to sport and film to get away from that. And so that's why when you see a team that awakens your imagination, you love it. And that's what that team did. And I was truly impressed by and excited about the number of people outside of Indianapolis that truly fell in love with that Pacers team. I mean, even like Knicks fans when we were in New York were like, yeah, man, I mean, that was incredible. Like that team was so much fun. And people genuinely empathized and felt for the Halliburton injury. I mean, the number of people that were like, I'm sorry about what happened. And I'm like, don't feel sorry for us. Like, feel sorry for Tyrese Halliburton because he's, he has that pressure now. I can't imagine what it must feel like to know how many people are, even though nobody here is going to love Tyrese Halliburton any less if he's not ever that same player again, he feels a responsibility to the people of this town, and I just can't imagine what that must feel like. And I hope that everyone considers that when putting timelines, for example, on his return. But it was a great trip, and the Hall of Fames were awesome. The Fenway was awesome, and Providence was awesome. And thank you to Will Fleming, who is now the voice of the Red Sox. That's another thing for Indianapolis to be proud of. A guy that comes through was doing IUPUI basketball and as well Indianapolis Indians baseball, and he is now the main radio play-by-play voice of the Boston Red Sox. Free agency getting underway officially just about 3.5 hours from now. Two big questions for the Indiana Pacers. One of them, do you redirect now with Miles Turner? And the other, did the power and the chips all now shift from team option to player option? And I'm not talking about Turner. I'll tell you who I'm talking about next. If I did not mention it earlier, I will mention it now. And maybe I did mention it earlier. Please humor me. I am neither a diehard fan of the Boston Red Sox. I was kind of a Blue Jays fan growing up as a kid, but I'm a fan of moments. And while I think the song itself, Sweet Caroline, if you know the history of it, is a little bit creepy, even though the Red Sox were down 9-0, when they fire up Sweet Caroline in Fenway Park on a sold-out Friday night on a clear evening, it's a pretty magical thing. Pretty cool to be a part of it.
You, of course, were rooting for Boston because of the beer bet.
That's right. You've already won the beer bet. The beer bet going back to, for those that don't know, at the beginning of the season, we each got to select two teams, and the win total of the two teams that we picked, whoever has the highest total wins. Eddie went with the Toronto Blue Jays and the Florida Marlins, correct?
Yeah, the Marlins are red hot right now. They've won 6 straight.
The Blue Jays at 45-38. They're playing pretty good. Pretty good ball. They are playing pretty well. The Marlins, the Miami Marlins, technically, I realize, 37-45. So you are sitting at, what, 74 wins?
Yeah.
75. No, wait, what did I say? 45, and what did I say for the Marlins? So you are sitting at 72 wins. Okay. Wait, what did I say? 45? Marlins? 72. Gosh darn it. 82 wins.
You got to carry the one.
No, math is usually I'm pretty good at, but I'm scrolling through so many numbers looking at the standings here. 82 for you. I had the Athletics and the White Sox. I admittedly was going with my heart. 34 for the Athletics. They were hanging around for a while there. And the White Sox obviously terrible at 28. So you're way out in front here. You're already 16 to the good of me.
And listener Chad has the worst team in baseball in the Colorado Rockies.
He has the Rockies and the Reds, right?
Yeah.
So he's sitting at 63. He's only 3 back of me. You've won the beer bet. Speaking of bets, the Pacers are in a situation where they're kind of got to force a gamble here.
I didn't know if you're going down the Malik Beasley route with that whole situation.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? The NBA and an investigation for the FBI. They haven't said the specific reason that they are investigating Malik Beasley, correct?
He was allegedly betting on games and specifically player props.
Yeah, not good. Miles Turner and Benedict Matherin are interesting for me with the Pacers, and let me explain. I'll begin with Miles Turner. Miles Turner is a free agent at 6 o'clock. And like I said earlier, you're going to see tonight between 6 o'clock and 6:10, you're going to hear every team in the NBA with an avalanche of news of this guy signed, this guy signed, this guy signed, this guy signed. And you're going to be like, what is going on? And typically with the Pacers, people are like, well, the Pacers are just sitting around doing nothing. Well, Turner's an interesting one. If you think about this Pacers team and this run, going into Game 7, Shannon was at that game and has video of the Pacers as they're taking the floor, right? And in that video, in that moment, if you freeze that moment in time, right then, that group was signed, sealed, and delivered to be back in totality and entirety for next year. For the most part. I mean, the core of it. That group was signed, sealed, and delivered to be brought back for another run next year at the moment that the ball was in the air going into Tyrese Halliburton's hands and a pass from Obi Toppin. And then he caught the ball, and he made a move, and the injury happened. And the injury changes everything. It doesn't mean that it changes everything, maybe even in terms of execution, but in terms of plan or evaluation, it does. And one of the things that it changes, and only Kevin Pritchard, Chad Buchanan, Rick Carlisle, only that group of the Pacers brass knows what their thought is on this. And that is, did it change the timeline or the financial obligation of willingness to bring back Miles Turner? Because in the moment just before Halliburton caught that pass, you were thinking they may well be on their way to winning this game. And in addition to that, Turner doesn't want to go anywhere, and the Pacers aren't going to want him to go anywhere. But the injury changes everything because now next year is in question. And in addition to that, the year after that, at least half of it is probably not in question, but you've got to wait to see the acclimation period of Halliburton, how he plays, how he looks, how everybody jives back in with him. Can this be like we've all had this happen? My 20-year high school reunion was one of the best nights of my life. My 25-year high school reunion was a very special evening, but it was anticipated to be as good as the 20th. And you just didn't hit the same mark, even though it was the same people. And that possibly could be the case with the Pacers a year and a half from now. So do you go into the luxury tax, and do you pay Miles Turner for, let's say, 3 or 4 years, knowing that the first year and a half of them, you're just holding serve. You're just keeping your place at the table. You're just holding your reservation. Or do you go out, for example, let's say Miles Turner gets offered somewhere a 4-year, $160 million contract by the Washington Wizards. And he's an unrestricted. Maybe he goes and does that. Does DeAndre Ayton again wet the whistle of the Pacers? He's 26 years old, and DeAndre Ayton may be a guy that you feel that you love the way that he can run with Halliburton once Halliburton's back, but he also can be a little bit more physically intimidating and defensive than Turner, even though I think Turner's been a great defensive player, but more physical. Ayton could be a more physical guy on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and play athletically on Tuesday and Thursday. That's what you like about him. I think there's a little more versatility there in terms of style. I would rather have Miles Turner than DeAndre Ayton. Do not misquote me here. But I'm saying, does Turner have a price tag that the Pacers say, we're not going to go above and beyond that, and if we have to, then we'll go with Ayton because he's 26 and he can play both and maybe even carry us next year until we get Halliburton back. I don't think that's going to be the case, but what I'm getting at is this. Turner was a slam dunk, can't miss, must-have for this team to come back and give it 1 to 2 more runs for a title. But that injury changes everything, including timelines and urgencies. The other thing that it changes is next year's role, theoretically, of Benedict Matherin. Because Matherin has been a score-off-the-bench guy. In the playoffs, he won them a game for the most part. Might have also lost him a game. I know that no one player does those things. I get it. But Matherin is a wonderful player, but he's a wonderful player in a style that isn't necessarily what is the Pacers' go-to A style, number one option. But now, because Halliburton is out, that injury changes everything. So Matherin, as that ball was headed towards Tyrese Halliburton, at that time, Matherin was a guy that, when the Pacers' offense started to grind down, rescued them in one of the games because he was able to, in Game 3, play his style of isolation, get to the basket, get fouled, go to the free throw line level of play. It doesn't make him a bad guy, by the way. I mean, that's how he plays. And it seemed as though if you had to pick one player on that roster that was going to be a financial casualty moving forward, it was going to be Benedict Matherin. Because he can play, and there's enough evidence out there that he can play, that somebody probably was going to pay him a level that the Pacers were not prepared to do so if they were concerned about the cap long term. And so he was one that everybody and their brother assumed, and their mothers too, that he could be dealt to give them flexibility financially moving forward. And then Halliburton caught that ball, and the injury changes everything. And now all of a sudden you go, well, he may be a starter next year. And the Pacers go from having kind of the power of what they wanted to do with Matherin to now possibly wanting to extend him, and Matherin going, wait a minute. I'm going to quote Lee Corso here, not so fast, my friend. Because I'm Benedict Matherin, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, next year, I'm going to gamble on myself. And I mentioned this earlier. I liken it to when Lance Stevenson was a free agent after his rookie year came up with Indiana. And the Pacers offered him more money than Charlotte. And everybody and their brother laughed at him for going to Charlotte, but he was gambling on himself because he looked at it and said, Charlotte wants me to sign a 4-year deal. The Pacers want me to sign a 5-year deal. The new collective bargaining agreement and television contract kicks in 4 years. The new cap kicks in 4 years. And when those years happen, when that cycle happens, that's the year that it's, like I mentioned earlier, it's like Oprah with max contracts. You get a max deal, and you get a max deal, and you get a max deal. And Othello Harrington's getting $100 million, and Brian Cardinal's getting $80 million or $60 million. And money's just flowing like the River Thames. And Matherin, in that year, Lance Stevenson took a gamble. It didn't pay off for him because he didn't play well, and his value went down. And yes, he became a free agent in a max contract year, but he didn't have the level of play in Charlotte, obviously, where he was able to cash in. Matherin could look at it now and say, I'm going to not sign whatever Indiana offers me right now, and I'm going to gamble that I not only stay healthy, but I play well in this coming year where I'm going to have increased starts, increased minutes, and increased points. And if a year from now I'm a guy that has started 68 games in a season, averaging 19.5 points and 6 boards per game, guess what? Now all of a sudden I'm a guy that an Orlando or a Phoenix or a Washington comes after and says, we're going to give you $40 million a year, $35 million a year. Sounds crazy, but not impossible. And now all of a sudden Matherin, as Indiana's going, hey, you know what? Let's lock him in now. Like, let's get this done now, so that because we need an insurance policy in case Halliburton doesn't come back 100%. What are we going to do? And if I'm Matherin, I'm going, well, looks like the shoe's suddenly on the other foot now, doesn't it? And I'm not saying he's a hardball kind of guy, but the truthfully, the negotiating power now probably shifts to Matherin, and he can play hardball a little bit.
Let me lobby this idea out to you, Jake, as well. Like, for the longest time when the Pacers were building this roster and looking to add that next piece, they needed to have a big contract to match any salary of a player that they were trying to get in return, whether that was a star, borderline superstar, or superstar. So that's why they went out and signed Bruce Brown to that 2-year, I can't even remember the exact terms, but it was like a lot of money. It was a hefty overpay that allowed them to trade for Pascal Siakam.
Right.
So if you're on the other side of this, from the Pacers' perspective, if you wait another year, let's say Matherin does have an exceptional 2025-2026 season, he ups the price, and now you can do a sign and trade with Benedict Matherin with a team that needs him, that may have an expiring contract or an older vet on a team that's not in a win-now mode, and you can make that sign and deal and bring in that veteran to complete whatever roster, whatever rotation,
that's fair,
or lineup that the Pacers want to have.
That's fair. I think right now, Eddie, they're looking at Matherin as a guy that they're going to need on the floor, right?
Yes.
And then Neesmith, as you mentioned as well. I mean, Neesmith is on a very team-friendly contract. And if Neesmith and McConnell are two guys that if they were actually in a contract year here, they would get buku bucks elsewhere. McConnell right now. Doesn't TJ McConnell and the run that he just went on just scream of suddenly the Wizards give him $25 million a year? Doesn't it just scream of it and make him the starter and not like look long-term? You know what I mean?
Right.
So what happens when you have runs like this?
Like, he's another one of those contracts, Jake, and I highly, highly, highly doubt that the Pacers would move on from him. But if you're talking about a team that's under 500 or just hovering right around 500, and they're already over the tax as the deadline's approaching, unfortunately, McConnell is one of those guys that falls into that contractual category that could be moved just to get under the tax.
Right.
I don't ever see them trading McConnell. That's the conversations that will have to be had.
It's a lot of question marks for them to look at, and I think it's going to be – and we may know answers sooner than later, right? 6 o'clock tonight, free agency begins. Greg Rakestar, by the way, is in for John. He will be in just a couple of minutes. We'll come back, put a tie on all of it, recap what we learned today on Query & Company. the evening? Being locked into your alerts?
I think I've got to do some yard work.
Really?
Yeah.
Has it cooled off? Are we done with the the terrible heat, the dangerous heat? I mean, at least for now. I realize summer's just underway, but
Jordan Clarkson is finalizing a contract buyout with the Utah Jazz.
he's an interesting one, right? He's kind of versatile, but he doesn't jump out at me as anybody that is going to be of note. Now, Utah, Ace Bailey did report, right? Didn't he?
Yes,
He's
he did.
completely turned things around and been like, yeah, this is great.
Jake, you weren't here last week, so you didn't get to share your thoughts. Your thoughts on the Pacers selecting Cam Jones?
I like it, and I'll tell you why. And I should have mentioned this earlier. I apologize. I think he's a versatile guard. So I think he can play. Is he going to come in and be some sort of starter for them? No. But he is a guy that I think can help out this year at the point guard position. And then if assuming that he plays and plays well, he reminds me of Nembhard in the fact that I think he can play both guard spots. Does that make sense? I don't know he's a starter at either one of them, but he's a nice insurance policy that can play both. So now the other one that was interesting to me was their second pick, right? Didn't they get basically another Ben Shepherd type?
Talon Peter?
Not to say he's going to make the roster, but
he'll for sure be a two-way guy, I would assume.
That's what I mean. And he, I kind of get the impression that he is like a Ben Shepherd type player, right? I mean, isn't that kind of how you see him?
Maybe.
An older player that is just kind of a steady player. I think a pretty good shooter, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know what
good shooter.
Yeah. I mean,
explosive.
What did he average last year? 15 a game, something like that?
Off the bench, yeah. 14 a game off the bench, and he only came off the bench because he didn't want to disrupt the flow of the starters.
He did play, Tennessee Tech, Arkansas Tech, and then Liberty. Now, interesting, and I have no idea if this is how he got on the radar, but, I know that, and I guess I won't say any names just to protect, but there's one of the members of the Pacers front office has a son that's involved in the basketball program at Liberty. I don't know if that's how he got on the radar or not.
Isn't the head coach down there someone who worked with Danny Granger?
That's a good question. Who is the head coach? It's Richie McKay, isn't it? Is he the head coach? Yes, he was the head coach at New Mexico. Been a little of everywhere.
So there's that too.
The draft itself, though, I'm trying to think. The draft, the first round was Wednesday night. You're right. I was off Thursday and Friday, so I didn't, I wasn't here to react or respond to really much of it. The one thing, and somebody came after me on social media about this, I got a kick out of it on draft night. One of the players that was being drafted,
VJ Etcombe.
I think that's it. You know what I'm about to say here?
I think so.
So Jay Billis said he's very comparable to he's seen right now is what was seen of Victor Oladipo at the age of 19. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think you can say that, though, because Victor Oladipo at the age of 19, you're talking about a player that's being selected in the top 5 at the age of 19. Victor Oladipo at the age of 19 was a relatively anonymous recruit to Indiana that was starting 5 games, and it wasn't, and even as a sophomore, he turned 20 in his sophomore year at Indiana. It was not until the end of his sophomore year when I can assure you with more certainty about this than the fact that my name is Jake and today is Monday. Because I remember vividly having the conversation with NBA scouts at the end of Oladipo's sophomore year and saying, the guy that I think might be athletic enough to play in the NBA? And they're like, on the IU roster? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, you mean Oladipo? Because everybody was so focused on Cody Zeller. And they're like, you mean Oladipo? And I said, yeah, like how am I off base? And it was like, no, he is becoming a guy that is definitely going to be heavily watched in his junior year. And then in his junior year, he just completely took off. My point being, his athleticism was definitely on display. But to state or imply that Victor Oladipo at the age of 19, had he elected to go into the NBA draft, would have been a top 5 pick is not even to the ballpark of accurate. He was not seen as a top 75 player even midway through his second year. Midway through his second year, he rose. He began to rise quickly. And then obviously in his junior year, he got into the point where he was a top 2 pick, I think, and was a huge rising star. But the draft itself is just different, as I mentioned going into it, in the fact that you're not as familiar with names, with faces, with careers, and etc. So there's more guessing that goes into it. Eddie, if you had to guess, tomorrow when we resume at noon, we will be discussing what when it comes to Miles Turner.
That he is re-signed with the Indiana Pacers.
Okay. And we will be discussing what when it comes to Benedict Matherin.
He'll still be a Pacer.
I agree with that, but will he be an extended Pacer?
No.
I think that's probably fair. Is there one? Okay, DeAndre Ayton. We will know what about him. Will he be with somebody, or is he still going to be out there floating in the wind?
He'll be floating, I think. Although the expectation is that there's already mutual interest between he and the Los Angeles Lakers.
Greg Rakestraw has arrived. Greg's been here since he got here before me, I think.
This is quite true, as A.J. Foyt would say.
Big show lined up?
Something like that. I get to do, when you're the substitute teacher, you kind of get the liberty of just talking to people you want to talk to.
I noticed you rolled in the VCR here to be able to show movies for the.
I did.
Those people that you would like to talk to are who?
So it's some interesting stories. So Rick Bozich, I think most people know, has been at the Louisville Courier-Journal and now WDRB in Louisville for like the last 40 or so years. He is retired as of tomorrow.
Legendary figure.
So, and from the region, went to IU. So he'll join us on the show coming up this afternoon. Do you know that there was 31, 32 NHL teams at this point?
Yep.
One of the radio announcers is from Fishers.
Really?
Mike Folta, who is the voice of the newly rechristened and relocated as of a year ago Utah Mammoth.
I did know this, yeah.
And so Mike will be on the show with us during the 4 o'clock hour.
Are you going to ask him about Indianapolis becoming an expansion?
I'm going to ask about that. And Mike is even a Fishers grad, which is obviously where the current team is located. Stephen Holder will be on the show. Scott Agnes will be on the show. And then one of the staples of July sports programming in this country has become TBT, the basketball tournament. And it is usually dominated by, former college alums. And, for example, there's a regional Hinkle Fieldhouse. There's the Butler team. There's the Assembly Ball team that plays for IU. There's actually going to be a team put together from a group called the Basketball League, which has teams from Indiana and other places. But there's a team called the Lebanon Leprechauns. And I'm going to tell theirs, as you're wearing green shorts, I will tell their story today with Chris Canal, their team owner.
The Leprechauns. Do you hear that, Eddie? Back in the days of Rick Mount, the Lebanon Leprechauns.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Ray.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Top of the day to you.
All right, Greg Rakestraw up next. We will be back with you at noon tomorrow, and I thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Quarry and Company.
I'm sorry, everybody. I'm really sorry.